Luck has been more than kind, and why not? Fortune favors the brave. You dared to fly and found success. But while in flight, you'd do well to remember that if you fly without direction, a crash might be inevitable. Hello and welcome to Lessons in Excellence. Big is beautiful, and in business it's all the more true. Expansion is the key to success.
1980, a year to remember for Electrolux. A year that made it the world's largest white goods manufacturer, with a portfolio of 35 product lines in 5 business areas. At the heart of its success was a business model driven by inorganic growth. It acquired over 200 businesses in 40 countries, including Electrohelios in Sweden, Arthur Martin in France, and Zanussi in Italy. Mergers and acquisitions were its critical path.
Sumantra, as we've just seen in the Electrolux case study, what is the imperative for companies to grow through acquisitions? Is it an imperative?
You know, where does the pressure come from? In many businesses, not necessarily in all, but in many businesses, you see a particular economic pattern of the business. Mm-hmm. You plot profitability, let's say, or some measure of performance against market share. Market share appropriately defined, whether it's national or regional or global, depending on the structure of the business, you plot it. What you get is a curve like the one you're seeing on the screen. Mm-hmm. In other words, at relatively low market shares, there are profitable players. Then, at high market shares, they are profitable players. And in between are a group of players who are caught up in another version of a valley of death. Now, assume you are one of these players and you want to grow. Now, you have two choices. You either grow organic growth, you build your own plants and so on. Then what happens, as you grow, you go through this curve. And you have to go through this valley of death in the bottom.
The low profit zone.
The low profit zone. And sometimes, if you take this market share range, it may take 6, 7, 8 years of organic growth to travel through the whole journey. Many companies find that very hard because third year down, you're losing money. And when somebody says, hey, you're losing money, he says, you have seen nothing yet. Just wait for the next 2 years, right? Very tough. At that time, acquisitions is one opportunity by which you can straight away jump. You take a one-time hit in your balance sheet rather than hit year after year in your profit and loss statement to acquire a company and make the jump, one or more companies, and make the jump from sort of zone 1, the niche zone, to zone 3, the leader zone, avoiding the zone in the middle.
Now, okay, let me talk to you about niche players. How important is it for a company, or when does a company decide that now I stop defending the niche and I try and make the leap that Sumantra was talking about of trying to get over this chasm, the zone B?
If you look at Ellen Mittal, Ispat, he's buying mostly companies, if you notice, which use DRI technology. He's able to benchmark, he's able to get better profitability, new markets, new customers, a whole bunch of synergies. So he's looking at synergy as well as growth.
Are you saying therefore it's limited, not limited, triggered by the ambition of the top man or the top management?
The logic of value creation. Let's not just put it on an individual, but we've spoken about the need of business models, the need for logic. I mean, in the end, you have to have value creation as well as an ego.
Value creation was the leitmotif of HLL's takeover of Tomco to synergize its soaps and detergents business. As for Manu Chabria, the acquisition of Shaw Wallace and Dunlop were tools for expansion, using one business as leverage to buy another.
You know, this whole concept of value creation and value capture, again, you've tried to distinguish it. Some people have just gone and captured value, build businesses, pick them up because they're available, but others have actually done value creation through an acquisition. What's the distinction?
Just take a comparison. One of the very successful stories of acquisition-led company building was GEC in the United Kingdom. not Weinstock, would buy companies. Now, typically, what kind of companies would he buy? Companies with a stable technology, not very technologically high-fi, companies with a reasonable brand, but that has been poorly managed. Therefore, he'll buy it typically at a much lower cost than its potential market value if it was properly managed. Then we'll bring into that company aggressive financial management, proper effective cost cutters, will improve the performance and sometimes sell it, sometimes keep it. That to our mind is value capture. But when you have something and you say this business together with what I have is more than either that business alone or my business alone, that value creation. When Hindustan Lever acquires Tomco, it can integrate Tomco's business with its own business, getting benefit both on the cost side as well as in the brand and the growth side. That's value creation.
Well, Geeta, you also talked about how, let's say, the Chabdia acquisitions of Shaw Wallace and Dunlop were actually far more value capture than value creation.
He just used one company to, for its resources, use that money to buy a second one, and then use the money in that to buy a third one, and so on.
Welcome back. India's Nicholas Piramal understood that mergers and acquisitions was the only way if it was to become a company to reckon with in the highly competitive pharma business.
Nicholas Piramal, one of India's leading pharmaceutical companies, a company that finds its elixir in acquisitions. It started with the acquisition of Nicholas Laboratories in 1988. In the 10 years post-acquisition, its profits grew from 80 lakh rupees to 57 crore rupees. And ever since, it has been on an aggressive acquisition spree, acquiring the Indian operations of Hoffmann La Roche of Switzerland, Boehringer Mannheim of Germany, and Hext's R&D facility. And it was this aggression that gave Nicholas Piramal the edge.
We've just seen how Nicholas Piramal has aggressively used the acquisition strategy to grow. Now let's learning from people who are aggressive acquirers. Now, what's a good pre-acquisition negotiation strategy? What kind of teams should you put together?
You know, I think if you are going to use acquisition not as sort of a one-shot thing, but as a part of your basic growth strategy, it is useful to make two different teams. One team is basically hard-edged finance, legal people who look at the whole deal continuously with eyes of skepticism. And the other is the actual negotiating team that is building the relationship with the acquired company, looking at strategic issues, looking at organizational, cultural issues. Why is it necessary? This process of negotiating for an acquisition develops a life of its own. Just it's a very human thing. You know, as you get into the acquisition, you say, I've invested so much. I want it. If it doesn't succeed, it's all a waste of time, right? You want it to succeed. So you develop a bias towards the acquisition. Supporting you are sometimes investment bankers, consultants, who make their fees only if the acquisition happens, not otherwise.
Right.
So the whole process develops a momentum that biases it towards saying yes. And in that process, the thrill of the chase may sometimes blind you. And at the end, you make an acquisition, you pay too much for it. So you need the other side, which is absolutely hard-edged, insulated from this whole momentum process that analyzes and comes back. It's a whisper in your ear. It says, no, this doesn't work. Then PV doesn't work. The profitability doesn't work.
It was such a warning whisper that saved the day for Ispat International. In 1997, Ispat was bullish about the acquisition of the 3.7 million ton Sidor plant in Venezuela. But then came the dampener. Financial analysis showed that it was overvalued. The pre-negotiation team cleaned what others missed by miles.
So somebody completely outside taking a totally dispassionate shareholder view that says, this is what you're buying, these are the good, these are the bad. Ultimately, how do you get the price down? In a manner that is logical, in a manner that you can convince the other party. That's the other benefit of the other
But there
team.
equally should be some managers who have some skin in the game. The second team equally needs some operational managers who are expected, know, and are committed to managing the acquired company.
Oh, so
So
people
they-
who can see their ambition reflected in acquiring
That's
the
right.
company? What
Not
does
only
that bring?
but also accountability. Means in the end, if they say that after acquiring you're going to get these synergies, you're going to get this much
And you are the
increase.
man who's going to run it.
That's
or you're
right.
the person.
You're the person who's going to
This is
deliver
the
it.
magic of Ellen Mittal. Lakshmi Mittal is always, if you look at his acquisition process, in the team will be the managers who will deliver the operating performance. If the team says we can take out $200 million in cost here or there, is the same person who is saying I can, who will then be responsible for doing it, and he knows right from the beginning that that will be the case. So there is this continuity from the pre-acquisition discussions, debates, with the post-acquisition delivery of performance. That's been a marvelous thing for Lakshmi Mittal in Ishbak.
What about understanding the seller's motivation? How important is that? Do you try and figure out whether he needs cash, whether he's trying to sell out because he can't manage the business? How do you use that information?
See, again, actually, if you think about these things, these are obvious things, right? You have a company, you want to sell. Now, right now, the reason you want to sell is because you're 65 years old, because none of your children want to do that business, you want the business to do well, you want to move out. Your primary logic is, I want my business to succeed. I want somebody who will take care of that business very well. She wants to have a business, she wants to sell the business. Her problem is, she had leveraged her stocks outside and is deep down here in debt, needs cash urgently, but urgently meaning day after tomorrow, not 6 months from now. The same business in these two situations, the package I'll put together, what I will offer, how I will negotiate, clearly will be different. So if you think about it that way, it makes obvious sense why a really detailed market research. Now here it is simple, two individuals. A big company, Roche, trying to sell its Indian operation. Now it's more complicated. People inside may have different intentions. The production manager may want to sell India for one reason, the CEO may have other reasons. If you understand in details the other side, what are their motivations, then your ability to meet their requirements at the minimum cost to you becomes much higher. It's just that. It's a basic negotiation strategy anywhere.
You know, a lot of times in an acquisition, the person who's selling the business to you is actually giving you or telling you how the future potential of this partnership is great. How much weight do you give to that?
Zero.
Zero?
Because in the end, the synergy lies with the person who's selling. That unit exits out of the group or whatever it may be into another group. It takes time for that synergy which is acquired to mesh in with the new organization, to build up new synergies, to build up new profit lines, all kinds of things.
Alacrity and competitive advantage go hand in hand. This is a constant in Piramal's strategy of acquisitions. In each of his key acquisitions, Ajay Piramal was a lesser player, but he was able to preempt the competitor every time, simply because Ajay Piramal acted decisively and with lightning pace.
Speed. How important is it? I mean, in an acquisition, you can either go too fast and mess it up, end up paying too much or messing up the deal, or go too slow and get somebody else to take it away, or the seller loses interest.
You talked about Electrolux. I still remember distinctly walking into Leif Johnson's room, who was then the CEO of Electrolux. And in one wall, he had whole shelves full of folders. What were these folders? Each of those folders was every company in the world that was in the white goods business. Electrolux have studied that company, understood its operations, understood the case for acquisition, what benefits we can get, how much price we can give, all of that. They're all done and kept. So that any one of the companies, if it comes tomorrow into play, you can't predict when it will come into play. If it comes into play, whereas any other competitor will then start from the scratch, what is this company, we've never even heard of it. Leif Johnson picks up the folder, it is there, all he needs to do is update it from the last updating. He instantly has an advantage in decision making.
Lakshmi Narayan Mittal, popularly known as the doctor of sick plants, and the doctor had a simple prescription: acquisitions. With an impressive list of acquisitions like Cibalsa in Mexico and Sidpec Tosco in Canada, he perfected the art of turning non-performing units into productive enterprises. He followed a simple three-tier approach: acquire loss-making steel units across the world, invest in reviving them, and finally create an enabling work culture that promoted productivity. The strategy spelt magic. Ispat International is one of the leading steel manufacturers in the world with a total asset value of $5.4 billion in 2002.
Now, we've taken over this company. We bought it. How does the integration process start? Do you jump into the company and say, this was wrong, 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 fix it, fix it, fix it, fix it, get your own people in, swarm it with your people? I mean, what I'm saying is, do you pick it up from the bootstraps and shake it up?
Try and understand strategically why you have bought this company. How you integrate it depends on why you have bought it.
Let's say absorption of a troubled, struggling
Company that you have just bought.
Right.
Divide, don't, the first thing I'll say is more acquisition integration efforts fail because companies try to do too much, not because they do too little. They want to do all the things at the same time. What I have seen is it's best to divide this integration phase into 3 steps. The first step says, I bought you, you're troubled. There's a reason why you're troubled. Typically, your top management is weak. Typically, troubled companies. I remove the top management.
So sack
protect
the
the
top.
rest of them. Let's take Electrolux as an example, because first thing they will do is remove the very top. Machine utilization. Maybe you can move some selected things from your system to there to enhance capacity use. Once you have cleaned them up, that's the first phase. Then you invest in them to build their strategic competence, improve their technology, improve their branding. You invest
So
strategically.
you're still building up
You're
that
still building
company.
that part. And then when it is operationally cleaned in the first phase, strategically sound, then you integrate that with your own healthy body. If you buy an organ, if the organ is sick and you put it in your body will become sick. All I say is, first make it healthy.
Fix that and largely fix it with the same management team.
But change the top. Change the top.
Change the top.
Have the courage to change the top. Very often there's a big mistake managers make because the CEO of that company has negotiated with you, isn't sacked. Huge mistake. Remove the top, find the strong managers, give them strength, but bring your managers in. First step, operational cleanup. Second step, strategic and organizational improvement of that company. Third step, then integrate, create the linkages between your managers and their managers, the flow of knowledge, the flow of competence, brand strategic integration.
Geeta, this seems to fly in the face of the instinctive thing that you would have if a large company picks up a small company, struggling small company, and you say, my God, these chaps must have been doing it wrong. Let me paratroop in my best people in. Let me paratroop in my systems and do a one-shot cleanup.
The strength of middle management is always underestimated. They really do know the company. The strength of frontline management is even more underestimated because they know the realities of the market. If you remove such people, you're not going to know enough about the company, about the situation it's in, the markets it's in. And very frankly, it's the top people who have created the trouble.
Finally, what is the, you've given us the sequence. Give us roughly the trigger points for transiting from stage 1 to stage 2 to final stage of integration.
I would say, yes, it's financial, but don't make the mistake of thinking it to be only financial. It is, you have to first stem the flow of blood. If you have a cut, first thing is stop the blood flow. How do you know the blood flow is stopped? First, no red is coming out. Same thing in business. No red is coming out in the P&L statement.
So you've
That's
got
a useful
profits,
thing.
yeah.
But that by itself is not enough. You have a measure of the operational benchmark, efficiency of operational processes, quality of products, customer satisfaction indices. These are all part like blood flow. That's in the first stage. Second stage, how do you know that strategically and organizationally it has come up? Then look at things like employee commitment, employee surveys. Look at things like, new product development, ability of that unit itself.
that unit.
So you switch to the strategic and organizational cultural measurement. And then compare them with yours. Now it is like me. Now it is strong. Then go for the merger.
In the next episode, join the man who led from the front to establish a pharma giant, Nicholas Piramal. Ajay Piramal talks about how acquisitions shape the future of his company.
I think a lot of acquisitions go wrong because of ego. It's really the ego of the person at the top, and therefore, let's bid a little more and go on. And this has happened times immemorial. I think there is a classic case where we had once come to an agreement with a company with a particular transaction. And then there was this other large pharma company which came to hear about that transaction. And actually, without doing any due diligence, without looking at the business, whatever our offer was, they, I think, offered sometime 1.5 to 2 times more than what we offered. And I think that acquisition has not paid off for them.
You said all the best.
Yeah, and you know, in fact, they came back to us, the sellers, and said that if you would like to match it, and we said no. And I know that otherwise that company has been very successful. But just because, I don't know whether it was ego, whether it was an anxiety to have a one-up on us, that they bid for it and acquired it, and has then proved to be very expensive.